The coffee mug shattered against the marble floor of Apex Security Solutions, its contents spreading like spilled blood across the pristine lobby. Elena Martinez, 34 and deliberately unremarkable, stood frozen in her ill-fitting security uniform as the fragments settled around her boots. Across the gleaming reception area, tech mogul Brad Mitchell sneered, his voice cutting through the air-conditioned silence like a blade. "I asked for your best security personnel, not some diversity hire playing dress-up." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The lobby fell dead silent. Even the perpetual hum of the building's ventilation system seemed to pause in judgment. Elena's colleagues, Jake Sullivan, Ryan Foster, and the other guards suddenly found their clipboards fascinating. Nobody defended her. Nobody even looked her way. Derek Hammond, the company owner, emerged from his office with sweat beading on his forehead, despite the October chill in Phoenix. "Mr. Mitchell, I apologize," Derek stammered, his voice cracking with nervous energy. "Let me get Jake to handle your security assessment personally. He's our most experienced operative." Brad Mitchell, whose cybersecurity empire had made him one of Arizona's most powerful businessmen, formed an intimidating presence with his two corporate security advisors flanking him like bookends. His designer suit probably cost more than Elena made in 3 months at Apex Security Solutions. "Your advertisement promises elite protection services," Brad growled, his laser-focused gaze sweeping dismissively over Elena's slight frame. "I see amateurs and quota fillers." The word quota dripped like acid from his tongue. Elena felt it burn, not because of her gender or her carefully cultivated appearance of inexperience, but because they assumed she was hired to fill a demographic requirement rather than for any actual skill. She had heard variations of this dismissal countless times over the past 18 months in Phoenix, but today, something felt different. Today, the familiar weight against her ribs, hidden beneath her loose uniform shirt, seemed to pulse with forgotten purpose. "I can handle the assessment," Elena said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The lobby fell into an even deeper silence. She had never volunteered for high-profile assignments, never challenged the established hierarchy at Apex Security Solutions. Her words, though soft, somehow carried more authority than Brad's booming commands. Jake Sullivan shifted uncomfortably, his hand instinctively moving to adjust his tactical vest. Ryan Foster studied his security scanner like it held the secrets of the universe. The receptionist, Maria Santos, gripped her desk phone tighter, her knuckles white with tension. Brad's lead security advisor, a mountain of a man named Rodriguez, stepped forward with theatrical disgust. "Look at this," he scoffed, gesturing toward Elena's modest stature. "She can't weigh more than 120 soaking wet. My teenage nephew has more intimidation factor." His companion, Thompson, laughed a sharp sound that ricocheted off the glass walls. "Maybe she can handle the metal detector at a shopping mall. This is corporate security for a Fortune 500 executive." Elena's hands remained steady at her sides, but these weren't just any hands. Calluses from years of precise training marked her palms, though she kept them hidden beneath tactical gloves. Her fingernails, kept regulation short, bore no polish or decoration, but she had learned to carry herself with deliberate awkwardness to appear less capable than reality demanded. Survival in the civilian world required invisibility, required people to underestimate what they were looking at. The building's vulnerability assessment shows 17 critical security gaps. Elena continued, her voice steady despite the mockery surrounding her. "Your executive protection detail has a 40-second response lag during shift changes, and your vehicle security protocols would fail against any coordinated assault." Brad stopped mid-insult. That level of tactical analysis required either extraordinary luck or genuine expertise. Most security guards wouldn't even know how to identify those specific vulnerabilities, let alone articulate them with such precision. She read that off some website, Thompson insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Anyone can memorize security terminology. Then let anyone fix the gaps, Elena replied, meeting Brad's suddenly interested gaze. But when your detail fails during an actual threat, remember you had the chance to upgrade your protection. Derek grabbed Elena's arm, not roughly, but firmly. Fear radiated from him rather than anger. He needed this contract. Offending Brad Mitchell meant financial ruin for his small security firm. The tech mogul's business alone represented 30% of Apex's annual revenue. Elena, return to perimeter patrol, Derek ordered, his voice tight with desperation. Mr. Mitchell, Jake will conduct the full assessment. He has 15 years of experience and military training. Elena looked at her boss, seeing the same desperation in his eyes that had driven her to accept this job 18 months ago, when she had nowhere else to go and everything to hide. The same desperation that kept her working for a third of what her real qualifications should command. Your current assessment missed the rooftop access vulnerability, she told Brad directly, ignoring Derek's increasingly frantic gestures. Building maintenance leaves that door unlocked every Tuesday between 2 and 4 p.m. Your cameras have a 90-second blind spot during their rotation cycle, and your panic room's communication system can be jammed with basic equipment. The lobby's air conditioning hummed back to life, but the silence remained thick and oppressive. Jake whistled low under his breath. He had conducted that initial security assessment himself, and Elena had just identified gaps that he'd completely missed, but acknowledging her expertise meant admitting 18 months of overlooking her contributions. The social order of Apex Security Solutions couldn't survive that revelation. Brad studied Elena with new interest, his business instincts recognizing competence even when it came in an unexpected package. How long have you been in security? He asked, his tone shifting from dismissive to calculating. Long enough, Elena replied, deliberately vague. The truth was complicated longer than anyone in this room could imagine, but not in ways she could ever explain. As Elena retreated toward the building's entrance, her radio crackled with dispatch. Updates about routine patrol schedules and client check-ins. She pressed the earpiece deeper, but her mind wasn't on the mundane communications. Instead, she was calculating sightlines, response times, and tactical approaches with the kind of automatic precision that took years to develop and was impossible to fake. In her locker, beneath a spare uniform and a thermos that had seen better days, lay her personal effects from another life. Professional-grade equipment that cost more than most people's cars. But wrapped in oilcloth at the very bottom was a small velvet box she hadn't opened in over a year. Inside that box lay a piece of metal that would change everything if anyone ever saw it. A Trident that represented the most elite training the United States military could provide. Outside, she could hear Brad's voice growing more animated as Jake stumbled through explanations for the security gaps she'd identified. The sound grew more heated as it became clear that their current protection protocols were woefully inadequate for someone of Brad's profile and threat level. Elena closed her locker, the velvet box still hidden beneath layers of civilian camouflage. Her father wouldn't recognize the woman she had become, hiding elite training to avoid scrutiny, accepting disrespect to maintain cover, pretending incompetence to stay invisible. But perhaps it wasn't too late. Perhaps dignity could be reclaimed, not through confrontation, but through undeniable demonstration of capability. The radio crackled again, with Jake's increasingly frustrated attempts to explain the security failures Elena had exposed. She could hear Derek's voice in the background, apologetic and desperate, promising improvements and upgraded protocols. Elena made her decision. She had spent 18 months hiding in plain sight, but some secrets were too important to keep. When lives were on the line, tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that assumptions about capability were often dead wrong. And when that moment came, she would be ready to show them exactly what they had been overlooking. The question wasn't whether she was qualified to handle elite security operations. The question was whether she was finally ready to stop hiding the qualifications that could save lives, including, potentially, her own. 3 days later, the tension at Apex Security Solutions had thickened like desert heat, trapped in a parking garage. Elena arrived for her shift at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes early as always, but found the office buzzing with an energy that made her stomach clench. Word had spread about the Brad Mitchell incident, and not in her favor. "Morning, Elena," Jake called out, but his usual dismissive tone carried a new edge of curiosity. Ryan nodded curtly from behind the equipment locker, his eyes following her movements with uncomfortable intensity. Only Maria Santos offered her customary warm smile from the reception desk, though even she seemed more cautious than usual. Derek emerged from his office, clipboard in hand, his expression unreadable. "Elena, we need to talk." Her heart sank. The private conversation she had been dreading was finally here. Derek's cramped office felt smaller than usual, surrounded by yellowed security certifications and faded photos from the company's early days. The morning sun through the blinds created harsh shadows across his desk. "Look, Elena," Derek began, avoiding direct eye contact. "That situation with Mitchell the other day. It's got people talking. Clients are asking questions." "What kind?" "OF questions," Elena asked, though she already knew the trajectory of this conversation. "About whether we're running a professional operation or some kind of—" He paused, searching for diplomatic words. "Training program for inexperienced personnel." The words stung because they were so far from the truth. Elena had been protecting assets and neutralizing threats since most of these people were in high school. Her experience ran deeper than anyone in this building could imagine, but in the civilian world, credentials meant nothing without documentation, and documentation meant exposure she couldn't afford. "I identified legitimate security vulnerabilities," she said quietly. "Mitchell's current protection has fatal flaws." "That's not the point." Derek's voice carried frustration that wasn't entirely directed at her. "This is a small company, Elena. Word of mouth keeps us alive. If clients think we're putting unqualified personnel on sensitive assignments—" Elena understood the unspoken message. Stay invisible or find another job. In Phoenix's competitive security market, there weren't many options for someone with an intentionally thin resume and a carefully constructed background that wouldn't survive serious scrutiny. "I understand," she said, though the words tasted like copper in her mouth. "Good. I'm glad we're clear." Derek stood, signaling the conversation was over. "Oh, and Elena, there's a new client coming in this afternoon. International businessman. Needs executive protection for a downtown meeting. I want you handling perimeter security only." Jake's taking point. As Elena returned to the main floor, she caught fragments of conversation that stopped abruptly when she appeared. Words like overstepping and knows her place floated through the air like toxic smoke. She had heard variations before in different contexts, but they always carried the same message: remember your position. Maria approached her station as Elena began checking her equipment for the day's assignments. "You okay, Hermana?" she asked, quietly, her voice carrying genuine concern. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. Maria was the only person at Apex who had ever called her sister, the only one who seemed to see past the carefully constructed facade of mediocrity that defined her here. "That was impressive the other day," Maria said, glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "I've been working security coordination for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone spot vulnerabilities that fast." "Just observant," Elena deflected, but Maria shook her head. "No, that wasn't observation. That was analysis. Professional level. Threat assessment." She paused, studying Elena's face with uncomfortable insight. Where did you really learn to do that? The question hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Elena had been waiting 18 months for someone to ask, to show genuine curiosity about her background, beyond the sanitized resume Derek kept on file. But now that the moment had arrived, she found herself paralyzed by the weight of explanation. Around, she said finally. You pick things up working different places. Maria nodded, accepting the evasion with grace, but her eyes remained thoughtful. Well, whoever taught you knew their business. Mitchell's people were taking notes during your assessment. As if summoned by their conversation, Jake's radio crackled with an update about the afternoon's client arrival. Through the front windows, Elena could see a black sedan approaching the building, its occupants hidden behind heavily tinted glass. Her training automatically cataloged details, government plates, reinforced doors, multiple antennas suggesting advanced communication equipment. High-value target, she murmured without thinking, then caught herself. Normal security guards didn't make those kinds of instant assessments. The sedan parked in the building's secured lot, and two men emerged with the careful precision of experienced operators. Elena's breath caught as she recognized their movement patterns, measured, alert, scanning for threats with the kind of systematic coverage that came from military training. The principal they were protecting remained in the vehicle while they established perimeter security. Professional detail, Maria observed, watching through the window. Not corporate security, something bigger. Elena's pulse quickened as she noticed details others were missing. The lead agent's suit jacket was tailored to conceal body armor, and his earpiece was military-grade rather than commercial security equipment. His partner maintained position with the vehicle while conducting a detailed surveillance sweep of the surrounding area. "Jake," Derek called out, his voice tight with nervous energy. "Our 3 o'clock is here early. Mr. Vasquez and his security team." Elena's blood went cold. Vasquez, she knew that name from classified briefings years ago. Arms dealer with connections to international terrorist networks, currently under federal investigation but operating within legal boundaries. If he was here seeking additional protection, something big was about to happen. Jake moved toward the front entrance with his usual swagger, but Elena could see his confidence was manufactured. He was out of his depth dealing with this level of client, and everyone in the room seemed to sense it except Jake himself. "Elena," Derek called out. "Perimeter watch. Make sure nobody gets close to the building during this meeting." As Elena moved toward her assigned position, her radio earpiece crackled with communications between Jake and the client's security detail. The conversation was stilted, unprofessional. Jake was trying to impress rather than coordinate effectively. Elena winced as she heard him making promises about security capabilities that Apex simply didn't possess. Through the building's glass walls, she watched the principal Vasquez finally emerge from his vehicle. He was older than his photos suggested, gray-haired and distinguished, but his eyes held the cold calculation of someone accustomed to violence. His movements were economical, precise, suggesting military background or extensive training. Elena positioned herself at the building's northeast corner, the assigned perimeter station that would normally be routine surveillance. But as she scanned the surrounding area, her enhanced training kicked in automatically. She identified 3 potential sniper positions, 2 vulnerable approach routes, and a drainage system that could conceal explosive devices. More concerning was what she noticed that Jake had missed entirely: a panel van parked across the street. With its engine running, 2 figures visible in the front seats, conducting what appeared to be surveillance of their own. Their positioning was too deliberate to be coincidental, and their attention was focused specifically on the building's entrance. Elena's instincts screamed warning, but she was trapped by her own cover story. Calling in the potential threat would require explaining how she'd identified it, and that explanation would lead to questions she couldn't answer. But allowing a potential attack to proceed was impossible for someone with her background and training. Her hand moved unconsciously to her radio, then stopped. She needed more information before escalating, but every minute of delay increased the potential danger. The meeting inside was scheduled to last 30 minutes, enough time for any watchers to position themselves for an assault or extraction attempt. Elena made her decision. She would conduct her own counter-surveillance operation, using skills that were supposed to remain buried forever. If her suspicions proved correct, she would find a way to alert the team without revealing too much about her capabilities. If she was wrong, nobody would ever know she had exceeded her authority. But as she began moving through the building's perimeter with the fluid precision of someone trained for combat operations, Elena realized that her 18 months of hiding were about to come to an abrupt end. Some threats were too serious to ignore, even if stopping them meant exposing everything she had worked so hard to conceal. Elena's movements around the building perimeter triggered memories she had spent 18 months trying to suppress. Each calculated step, each tactical assessment, each threat evaluation pulled her back to a world she thought she had left forever. As she maintained visual contact with the suspicious van, while appearing to conduct routine security checks, fragments of her real past began surfacing like debris from a shipwreck. 18 months earlier, Coronado Beach, California. The sand was still warm from the setting sun when Lieutenant Elena Martinez received the call that would destroy everything she had built. She was off duty, finally allowing herself to relax after a grueling 6-month deployment that had taken her team deep into hostile territory for operations that would never appear in any official record. "Martinez, you need to get back to base immediately." Commander Sarah Wells's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. "We have a situation." Elena's stomach had dropped. In the SEAL community, situations usually meant someone was either dead or about to be court-martialed. She drove back to Naval Amphibious Base Coronado with growing dread, her mind racing through recent operations, trying to identify what could have gone wrong. The conference room was packed with people who shouldn't have been in the same building together: Naval Criminal Investigative Service agents, Pentagon officials, CIA liaisons, and her entire chain of command looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Elena sat in the single chair facing this tribunal, her dress uniform crisp, despite the chaos in her mind. "Lieutenant Martinez, agent." Rebecca Foster began, her voice carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to ending careers. "We need to discuss Operation Sandstorm." Elena's blood went cold. Sandstorm had been classified at levels that required congressional oversight. The fact that it was being discussed in this room meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. 3 weeks ago, your team extracted a high-value target from a terrorist compound in Syria. Agent Foster continued, consulting a thick file. Intelligence gathered from that operation led to the disruption of planned attacks on American soil. However, we now have evidence suggesting that mission intelligence was compromised before your team deployed. The accusation hung in the air like a death sentence. In the special operations community, being suspected of leaking classified information was worse than being suspected of cowardice. It meant everything you had sacrificed for, every brother and sister you had served with, every mission you had completed successfully, was now tainted by doubt. "I never compromised operational security," Elena said firmly, her voice steady despite the weight of stares around the table. "The evidence suggests otherwise," Agent Foster replied, sliding photographs across the table. "These images show you meeting with individuals who have known connections to foreign intelligence services." Elena studied the surveillance photos with growing horror. They showed her at a coffee shop in San Diego, sitting across from David Kellerman, a defense contractor she had dated briefly 6 months earlier. What the photos didn't show, what the investigators either didn't know or chose to ignore, was that David had approached her, not the other way around. Their relationship had been a recruitment attempt, when she had immediately reported to her commanding officer. David Kellerman attempted to recruit me as an intelligence asset, Elena explained. I reported the contact according to protocol. The meetings shown in these photos were conducted under supervision to gather counterintelligence. There's no record of any such report, Agent Foster said coldly. Elena's world tilted. She looked at Commander Wells, expecting support, but saw only careful neutrality. The kind of expression worn by someone who had already been told how this would end. Commander Wells received my report personally, Elena insisted. I have copies of the documentation. Commander Wells has no memory of such a report, Agent Foster replied. And no documentation exists in your file. Elena realized with sickening clarity that she was being sacrificed. Someone with more rank or better connections had decided that a junior officer would take the fall for an intelligence breach she had actually helped prevent. In the world of classified operations, truth was less important than perception, and perception could be manufactured by people with sufficient authority. The hearing continued for 6 hours, with Elena's career being systematically dismantled by people who had never risked their lives for their country. Her commendations were recontextualized as evidence of reckless behavior. Her successful missions were attributed to luck rather than skill. Her loyalty was questioned based on manufactured evidence and deleted documentation. Lieutenant Martinez. Commander Wells finally spoke, her voice heavy with regret that seemed genuine. Given the sensitivity of the intelligence potentially compromised and the nature of the evidence presented, I have no choice but to recommend administrative separation from the Navy. Administrative separation, not a court-martial, which would have allowed her to defend herself properly, but a bureaucratic death sentence that would end her career without the messy complications of due process. Elena would be processed out of the military with an other than honorable discharge, making her unemployable in any security-related field. Ma'am, Elena said quietly, I served my country with honor for 8 years. I never compromised classified information. I reported the recruitment attempt as required by regulations. I believe you, Commander Wells replied, and Elena heard the sincerity in her voice. But believing you and proving it are different things. The Navy needs this matter resolved quickly and quietly. Your sacrifice serves the greater good. Elena's sacrifice. As if destroying an innocent person's career was somehow noble rather than simply convenient for people who wanted to avoid admitting their own failures. Present day. Phoenix. The memory faded as Elena completed her circuit of the building, but the bitter taste of betrayal remained fresh even 18 months later. She had lost everything, her career, her identity, her brothers and sisters in arms who couldn't risk associating with someone under suspicion. The Navy had given her 30 days to clear her belongings and disappear. She'd chosen Phoenix because it was far from the military communities where her story might be known. She'd taken the job at Apex Security Solutions because it paid enough to survive while requiring minimal background investigation. She'd built a new identity as Elena Martinez, unremarkable security guard, because Elena Martinez, Navy SEAL, no longer existed according to official records, but the training remained. 8 years of the most advanced military education available, including specialized skills in close-quarters combat, tactical planning, counterterrorism, and threat assessment. Knowledge that could save lives, but couldn't be used without risking exposure and the inevitable questions about her past. The suspicious van was still in position, its occupants maintaining surveillance of the building. Elena's enhanced vision caught details that civilian security would miss. The passenger was using military-grade optics, and the driver's positioning suggested counter-surveillance training. This wasn't random criminal activity, it was a professional operation. Elena checked her watch. Vasquez's meeting was scheduled to last another 20 minutes, but professional operators wouldn't wait for a schedule if they decided to act. Her Radio crackled with routine check-ins from other security personnel, none of whom had noticed the potential threat developing across the street. She was trapped between two impossible choices: maintain her cover and potentially allow a high-value target to be compromised, or act on her training and risk exposure that would end the new life she had carefully constructed. But as she watched the van's occupants making what appeared to be final preparations for some kind of action, Elena realized that some choices weren't really choices at all. Her father had taught her that honor wasn't about recognition or reward, it was about doing what was right regardless of personal cost. The Navy had taken her rank, her career, and her official identity, but they couldn't take the principles that had driven her to serve in the first place. Elena Martinez, the unremarkable security guard, would have called in the potential threat and waited for others to respond. But Elena Martinez, the Navy SEAL, was about to take control of the situation in ways that would change everything forever. The question was no longer whether she could maintain her cover. The question was whether she was finally ready to reclaim the identity that had been stolen from her, regardless of the consequences. Elena's radio crackled to life as she completed another circuit of the building, her enhanced awareness cataloging every shadow, every potential threat vector, every escape route. Jake's voice came through the earpiece, tense with the kind of stress that preceded catastrophic mistakes. "Control, this is point 1. Client is requesting additional perimeter expansion. Something about elevated threat assessment." Derek's voice responded immediately from the command center. "Point 1. Maintain current protocols. We don't have authorization for expanded operations." Elena's pulse quickened. If Vasquez was requesting expanded security mid-meeting, his intelligence sources had identified the same threat she was tracking. The arms dealer hadn't survived decades in international black markets by ignoring his instincts, and those instincts were apparently screaming danger. Through her earpiece, she could hear Jake's growing frustration as he tried to manage a situation beyond his capabilities. "Control, the client's security chief is insisting on additional countermeasures. They want rooftop surveillance and extended vehicle security." Negative. Point 1. We don't have qualified personnel for those operations. Elena winced. Jake was about to make a critical error, either promising capabilities Apex didn't possess or refusing reasonable security requests from a high-value client. Both options would end badly, but one might get people killed. The suspicious van shifted position slightly, moving to a new angle that provided better sightlines to the building's main entrance. Elena's training automatically calculated the implications. They were preparing for something, and that something was scheduled to happen soon. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ms. Martinez, this is Agent Foster, NCIS. We need to discuss your current employment situation. Call immediately." Elena's blood went cold. Agent Foster, the same NCIS investigator who had destroyed her military career 18 months ago. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Someone had connected Elena Martinez, security guard, with Lieutenant Elena Martinez, disgraced Navy SEAL. She deleted the message without responding, but the damage was done. Her carefully constructed civilian identity was compromised, which meant her past was about to collide with her present in ways that could destroy both. Maria's voice came through her radio, cutting through her spiraling thoughts. "Elena, you've got company approaching from the east parking area. 2 individuals moving with purpose." Elena's head snapped up, automatically scanning the indicated direction. 2 men in business suits were walking toward the building with the measured pace of professionals conducting reconnaissance. Their movements were too coordinated to be casual visitors, and their attention was focused on security positions rather than the building's entrance. "Copy that, Maria," Elena responded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Conducting visual assessment now." Through her tactical observation, Elena identified details that would escape civilian security. Both men wore communication earpieces. Their suit jackets were tailored to conceal weapons, and their approach route had been calculated to avoid the building's primary surveillance cameras. This wasn't customer traffic. This was a professional advance team. Jake's voice crackled through the radio again, now clearly agitated. "Control, we've got multiple unknown individuals approaching the building. Client security is requesting immediate lockdown protocols. Point 1. What's your assessment of the threat level?" Derek's voice carried the strain of someone trying to manage a crisis without adequate information. Elena listened to Jake's response with growing horror. Control. They look like business people? I'm not seeing any obvious weapons or aggressive behavior. The response demonstrated exactly why Jake wasn't qualified for this assignment. He was analyzing the situation like a civilian security guard checking for shoplifters, not like a professional protecting high-value assets from sophisticated threats. Elena's SEAL training screamed warnings that Jake couldn't even perceive. Phone buzzed again. Another message from Agent Foster. "Elena, lives may be at stake. Your military expertise is needed. Call now or we'll come to you." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. Nesis wasn't just tracking her location. They knew about the current security situation and were suggesting federal involvement. That meant the threat against Vasquez was bigger than a simple criminal operation. It meant Elena was about to be caught in the middle of something that could expose her military background to everyone at Apex Security Solutions. Through the building's glass walls, she could see the meeting in progress. Vasquez sat at the conference table with Derek and two other Apex personnel, but his security chief stood near the windows with the rigid posture of someone expecting trouble. The man's eyes continuously scanned the perimeter, and Elena realized he had probably identified the same threats she was tracking. The two-man advance team had reached the building's entrance and were now speaking with reception. From her position, Elena could see Maria's increasing discomfort as she handled their inquiries. These weren't potential clients making casual inquiries. They were conducting information gathering that would normally precede an operation. Elena's training kicked into overdrive, automatically developing response scenarios and tactical options. If this was a coordinated assault on Vasquez, the advance team was gathering final intelligence while the surveillance van coordinated positioning for the primary assault team. Standard procedure would be to neutralize perimeter security first, then move against the target during the confusion, but acknowledging that assessment meant acknowledging military-level threat analysis capabilities that Elena Martinez, civilian security guard, shouldn't possess. Speaking up would require explanations she couldn't provide without destroying the life she had rebuilt. Jake's voice came through the radio again, now edged with panic. "Control, client security is demanding to speak with our tactical operations supervisor. They want someone with military experience to coordinate response protocols." Elena's heart sank. Apex Security Solutions didn't have a tactical operations supervisor. Their most advanced training consisted of basic crowd control and alarm response procedures. Jake was about to admit to a high-value client that their security company was fundamentally unqualified for the protection they had promised to provide. "Point 1. Patch them through to me," Derek responded, but Elena could hear the desperation in his voice. He was stalling, trying to avoid admitting the depth of their inadequacy. The conversation Elena could overhear through her earpiece confirmed her worst fears. Vasquez's security chief was asking detailed questions about counter-surveillance capabilities, tactical response procedures, and coordination with federal law enforcement capabilities that Apex simply didn't possess. Meanwhile, the suspicious van had been joined by a second vehicle, a dark SUV that positioned itself to cover the building's rear exit. Elena's tactical assessment crystallized. This was a coordinated operation with multiple teams moving into position for either extraction or elimination of the target. Her phone rang. Agent Foster calling directly. Elena stared at the screen, knowing that answering would mean acknowledging her military identity to federal investigators, but ignoring it might mean allowing a successful attack on American soil. Through her earpiece, she heard Jake's voice cracking under pressure. Control, I don't know how to respond to their security questions. They're asking about things I've never heard of. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible decision. She could maintain her cover and watch as inadequate security led to catastrophic failure, or she could act on her training and risk exposing everything she had worked to hide. But as she opened her eyes and saw the second surveillance vehicle moving into final position, Elena realized that some situations didn't offer the luxury of maintaining comfortable lies. Sometimes protecting innocent lives meant embracing uncomfortable truths, regardless of personal consequences. Her finger hovered over the answer button as Jake's increasingly desperate radio calls provided a soundtrack to her decision. In 18 months of hiding, she had convinced herself that her military service was a chapter of her life that had been forcibly closed. Now, watching a coordinated threat develop against a high-value target while civilian security personnel struggled with challenges beyond their training, Elena understood that some chapters could never truly be closed. They could only be temporarily set aside until circumstances demanded their continuation. Elena's decision was made for her when the building's fire alarm suddenly shrieked to life, its piercing wail cutting through the afternoon air like a knife. Her radio exploded with confused chatter as Jake's voice, now edged with panic, tried to coordinate a response he didn't understand. Control, we've got a building-wide fire alarm activation. No smoke visible, no heat signatures. This could be a false alarm or it's a diversion, Elena said into radio before she could stop herself. The words came out with the clipped authority of someone trained to handle crisis situations, a tone that cut through Jake's confused rambling like a blade. The radio went silent for a heartbeat. Then Derek's voice, confused. Perimeter 1. Did you just... Elena's training took over completely. She keyed her radio again, her voice now carrying the unmistakable cadence of military operations. Control, this is a coordinated assault. The alarm is designed to force evacuation and create confusion. Do not allow the principal to exit the building. Repeat, maintain secure positions and do not evacuate. Through the building's windows, she could see chaos erupting inside. Office workers were heading toward exits, following standard fire drill procedures that would walk them directly into whatever trap the assault team had prepared. Vasquez's security chief was shouting orders, trying to maintain control while Derek and Jake stood frozen, clearly out of their depth. Elena, what the hell are you talking about? Jake's voice crackled through the radio, but she could hear the uncertainty beneath his bluster. Deep down, he knew she was right, even if he couldn't understand how she knew. Elena's phone rang again, Agent Foster. This time she answered, Agent Foster, this is Martinez. We have an active threat situation developing at my location. Multiple surveillance teams, coordinated timing with building alarm activation. This is a professional operation. Elena, thank God. Foster's voice carried relief mixed with urgency. We've been tracking chatter about a potential move against Vasquez. His intelligence indicates a contract has been placed by parties unknown. You're the only qualified person on site. I'm a security guard, Elena replied automatically, but the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. You're a Navy SEAL with specialized counterterrorism training. And right now you're the only thing standing between a high-value intelligence asset and a coordinated assassination attempt. Elena's world tilted. Vasquez is an intelligence asset? Turned. 6 months ago. He's been feeding us information about arms trafficking networks. The contract on his life suggests his cover has been blown. Elena, we need you to protect him until federal response teams can arrive. Through her earpiece, Elena could hear the situation inside deteriorating rapidly. Jake was arguing with Vasquez's security chief about evacuation procedures while Derek tried unsuccessfully to contact building management about the fire alarm. Meanwhile, Elena's tactical assessment was painting an increasingly grim picture of their circumstances. The suspicious van had moved again, positioning itself to cover the building's main exit. The two-man advance team had disappeared from the lobby, which meant they were either inside the building or moving to secondary positions. The dark SUV was now blocking the rear parking area, effectively trapping anyone inside the building. Estimated time for federal response. Elena asked Foster, her mind automatically calculating tactical options. 20 minutes minimum. Phoenix PD is responding to the fire alarm, but they're not equipped for this level of threat. 20 minutes. Elena's SEAL training ran scenarios. In milliseconds, each one ending badly as she continued to pretend she was just a civilian security guard. But acting on her training meant exposing 18 months of carefully constructed lies to everyone at Apex Security Solutions. Her radio crackled with Jake's increasingly frantic voice. "Control, Vasquez's people are refusing to evacuate. They're saying something about the alarm being a tactical deception." What the hell does that even mean? Elena made her choice. She keyed her radio, and when she spoke, her voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone trained to command in crisis situations. "All stations, this is Perimeter 1 assuming tactical command. Jake, get away from the windows immediately. Derek, cut the building's main power to disable elevator access. Maria, activate lockdown protocols and seal all entry points. Elena, you can't just..." Jake started to protest. "Shut up and follow orders," Elena snapped, her voice carrying a level of command authority that silenced all argument. "We have multiple hostile teams in position for a coordinated assault. The fire alarm was designed to force our principal into the open, where he can be eliminated." Through the building's windows, she could see the immediate effect of her commands. Vasquez's security chief straightened with visible relief, recognizing competent leadership when he heard it. Derek, despite his confusion, was moving toward the building's electrical controls. Even Jake, though clearly rattled by Elena's sudden transformation, was backing away from the exposed window positions. Elena's tactical mind was now fully engaged, running continuous assessments and updating response plans. She could see patterns invisible to civilian security, the way the assault teams had positioned themselves, the timing of the diversion, the coordination that suggested extensive advance planning. "Foster," she said into her phone, "I'm seeing indicators of a 4-team operation. Primary assault, secondary support, overwatch, and extraction. They've been planning this for weeks. How can you tell?" "Because I've run operations like this," Elena replied, the admission feeling both liberating and terrifying. "Vehicle positioning, timing coordination, advanced reconnaissance, this is military-level planning." Her radio erupted with Maria's voice. "Elena, we've got movement in the north stairwell. Someone just bypassed the card reader system." Elena's pulse spiked. The advance team had gained building access and was moving toward the conference room where Vasquez was trapped. In approximately 90 seconds, they would reach the target floor, and neither Jake nor Derek had the training to stop them. "Maria, how many cameras cover the north stairwell?" Elena asked, her mind racing through tactical options. 3, but the middle camera went dark about 5 minutes ago. Professional work. The assault team had disabled surveillance as they advanced, maintaining operational security while gathering real-time intelligence about their target's location. Elena looked at the building's entrance, calculating distance and response time. She could reach the north stairwell in under 60 seconds if she moved immediately, but intercepting the assault team would require using skills that would expose her military Background to everyone watching. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Foster. Federal response delayed. Multiple incidents across the city, coordinated distraction operations. You're on your own for at least 30 minutes. Elena stared at the message, understanding its implications. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. It was a sophisticated operation designed to stretch federal resources thin while eliminating a high-value intelligence asset. The kind of operation that required significant resources and inside knowledge of federal response protocols. Through her earpiece, she could hear Jake's voice cracking under pressure. Elena, I don't know what to do. These people are asking me tactical questions I can't answer. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of 18 months of carefully maintained anonymity pressing against the urgent need to act on her training. When she opened them, her decision was crystal clear. Jake, patch me through. To Vasquez's security chief, she said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. It's time to stop pretending I don't know how to handle this situation. As she began moving toward the building's entrance with the fluid precision of someone trained for combat operations, Elena realized that her carefully constructed civilian identity was about to be destroyed. But some sacrifices were necessary to protect innocent lives, and she had spent too many months hiding while others faced dangers. She was uniquely qualified to handle that. The question was no longer whether she could maintain her cover. The question was whether she remembered enough of her SEAL training to keep everyone alive until federal backup arrived. Elena moved through the building's lobby with the silent precision of someone trained for close-quarters combat, her civilian security uniform feeling foreign against muscle memory that demanded tactical gear. Every step carried the weight of 18 months of careful deception crumbling under the pressure of immediate necessity. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Through her earpiece, she could hear the controlled chaos of her colleagues trying to process what they had just witnessed. Elena Martinez, the quiet security guard who barely spoke above a whisper, had just assumed tactical command of a crisis situation with the kind of authority that came from years of military leadership. Derek, talk to me. Jake's voice crackled through the radio, confusion and fear evident in every word. What just happened? How does Elena know about coordinated assault tactics? Derek's response was tight with barely controlled panic. I don't. No, Jake. Right now I don't care. If she can keep Vasquez alive until the feds arrive, we follow her lead. Maria's voice cut through their conversation with urgent professionalism. Elena, hostile team has reached the 3rd floor. 2 individuals, armed, moving toward the conference room. ETA 3 minutes to target. Elena's tactical mind automatically calculated response options while her phone buzzed with another message from Agent Foster. Elena, we've identified the assault team. Former Russian Spetsnaz hired through intermediaries. These are not amateurs. Former Russian Special Forces. Elena's blood went cold as the implications hit her. This wasn't a simple assassination. It was a message to other intelligence assets that nowhere was safe, no protection adequate. The kind of psychological warfare that required eliminating not just the target, but anyone who tried to protect him. Her radio crackled with an unfamiliar voice, Vasquez's security chief speaking directly to her for the first time. Perimeter 1. This is Tactical 6. My principal is secure in the conference room, but we need immediate threat neutralization. What's your military background? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Elena's colleagues were listening. Agent Foster was monitoring, and her response would determine whether her carefully constructed civilian identity survived the next 60 seconds. Tactical 6, this is Perimeter 1, Elena replied, her voice carrying the clipped precision of military communications. 8 years naval special warfare, specialized in counter-terrorism and close protection operations. Currently tracking multiple hostile teams converging on your position. The silence that followed her admission was deafening. Through the building's security cameras, Elena could see Jake's face go white with shock, Derek's mouth hanging open in disbelief, and Maria staring at her radio as if it had just spoken in a foreign language. Vasquez's security chief responded immediately, relief evident in his voice. "Copy that, Perimeter 1. Finally someone who knows what they're doing. What's your tactical assessment?" Elena moved into the north stairwell, her enhanced hearing detecting movement above her. The assault team was professional minimal noise. Coordinated timing. Tactical discipline that confirmed Agent Foster's intelligence about their Russian Special Forces background. Tactical 6, we have a 4-team coordinated assault designed to overwhelm civilian security response, Elena reported. Her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Primary assault team is 90 seconds from your position. Secondary teams are blocking egress routes and maintaining overwatch. This is a military-level operation. Her phone rang again, Agent Foster calling with updates that couldn't wait. For text messages. "Elena, we've got a problem." Foster's voice was tight with urgency. "Intelligence suggests this operation has inside information about federal response protocols. Someone with high-level clearance has been feeding them operational intelligence." Elena's tactical assessment shifted as she processed this information. If the assault team had inside intelligence, they knew about federal response times, backup procedures, and probably Elena's own military background. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a trap designed to eliminate both the target and anyone qualified to protect him. "Foster, they know about me," Elena said quietly, moving up the stairwell with careful precision. This whole situation could be designed to expose and eliminate former special operations personnel working in civilian security. That's what we're afraid of. Elena, if you engage these operators, your military service becomes public record. NCIS will have to acknowledge your background, which means admitting we may have made errors in your administrative separation. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. Saving Vasquez meant exposing the cover-up that had destroyed her military career. NCIS would be forced to explain why a Navy SEAL with an exemplary service record had been quietly discharged under suspicious circumstances. Through her earpiece, she could hear Jake's voice, now openly questioning everything he thought he knew about his colleague. "Derek, I've worked with Elena for 18 months. She changes oil and rotates tires. How is she suddenly giving tactical briefings like some kind of military commander?" Derek's response carried the strain of someone trying to hold together a situation spinning beyond his control. "I don't know, Jake, but right now she's the only thing standing between us and a complete disaster. Whatever her background is, we need her expertise." Elena reached the second-floor landing, where building schematics on the wall showed her the tactical layout she needed. The conference room was positioned with only one approach route, a natural choke point that could be defended by someone with appropriate training. Her radio crackled with Maria's voice. "Elena, I'm seeing additional vehicles approaching the building. 3 black SUVs, government plates. Looks like federal response is arriving early." Elena's heart sank. If federal agents were arriving while she was engaged with the assault team, her military background would be impossible to hide. Every aspect of her response would be documented, analyzed, and compared against official records that supposedly didn't exist. Vasquez's security chief came back on the radio with increasing urgency. "Perimeter 1, hostile team is 30 seconds from this position. We need immediate support." Elena made her decision. She keyed her radio one final time before entering the third-floor corridor where her SEAL training would either save lives or destroy the anonymity she had spent 18 months building. "All stations, this is Perimeter 1. I'm moving to engage the hostile team. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, Remember that protecting innocent lives is more important than maintaining comfortable lies. As Elena moved into the corridor with the fluid precision of someone trained for combat operations, she could hear Agent Foster's voice through her phone. "Elena, federal agents are documenting everything. Your military service is about to become public knowledge whether you want it or not." Elena smiled grimly as she approached the conference room where two former Russian Special Forces operators were about to discover that their intelligence about civilian security response had been fatally incomplete. Some secrets were too dangerous to keep, and some identities were too important to hide. When lives hung in the balance, the question wasn't whether her cover would survive the next few minutes. The question was whether she could remember enough of her SEAL training to ensure that everyone else survived to see the explanations that would inevitably follow. Her radio crackled one last time with Jake's confused voice. "Elena, I don't understand. What's happening? But be careful out there." Elena's response carried 18 months of suppressed military bearing. "Copy that. Engaging hostiles now." The corridor stretched ahead of Elena like a gauntlet, its fluorescent lighting casting harsh shadows that would have concealed a dozen ambush points to civilian eyes. But Elena's vision had been trained to read tactical environments the way others read books, every corner, every doorway, every potential threat vector cataloged and assessed in milliseconds. Through the thin walls, she could hear the muffled voices of the assault team conducting their final approach to the conference room. Their Russian-accented English was barely audible, but Elena's enhanced hearing caught fragments that confirmed her worst fears. Target confirmed inside. Eliminate security. No witnesses. Her phone vibrated with a final message from Agent Foster. "Elena, whatever you do in the next 5 minutes will be documented by federal agents and analyzed by military intelligence. Your SEAL career will be officially acknowledged. Are you prepared for that?" Elena stared at the message, understanding its full implications. For 18 months, she had been Elena Martinez, invisible security guard, living in self-imposed exile from the identity that had defined her adult life. In the next few minutes, she would either die as Elena Martinez or emerge as Lieutenant Elena Martinez, Navy SEAL woman, whose military record would have to be officially restored to explain her capabilities. The choice should have been terrifying. Instead, Elena felt a strange sense of relief as she deleted the message and drew upon training that had been suppressed but never forgotten. Through her earpiece, she could hear the building's security systems responding to the federal agents. Arrival. Derek's voice was tight with confusion as he tried to coordinate with authorities, who clearly knew more about the situation than he did. "This is Derek Hammond, owner of Apex Security Solutions. We have a client protection situation in progress, and one of my employees seems to be handling it." An unfamiliar voice responded, Federal Command Authority. "Mr. Hammond, we're aware of your employee's background. Continue following her tactical directions until we can establish operational control." Elena could almost hear Jake's world collapsing through the radio. Her background? What background? Elena fixes coffee machines and checks parking passes. But there was no time for explanations. Elena's tactical assessment indicated the assault team was now within 30 seconds of breaching the conference room where Vasquez waited with his inadequately armed security detail. 2 former Russian Special Forces operators against 1 corporate bodyguard. The outcome was mathematically certain unless someone with equivalent training intervened. Elena reached the corridor junction where her SEAL training took complete. Control. Her movements became fluid, silent, economical, every step calculated to minimize exposure while maximizing tactical advantage. The woman who had spent 18 months slouching through security rounds disappeared, replaced by someone who had been trained to neutralize threats that regular soldiers couldn't handle. She could hear the assault team's final preparations through the conference room door. Equipment checks, timing confirmations, The soft metallic sounds of weapons being readied for close-quarters combat. Professional killers preparing to execute a mission. They had probably rehearsed dozens of times. Elena's radio crackled with Vasquez's security chief, his voice carrying the controlled tension of someone who understood exactly how desperate their situation had become. Perimeter 1, we have visual on 2 hostiles outside our position. They're preparing breaching charges. Estimated 30 seconds to door breach. Breaching charges. Elena's tactical mind shifted into combat mode as she realized the assault team was prepared to blow the conference room door rather than risk a conventional entry. The explosion would disorient defenders while creating multiple entry points. Standard Special Forces procedure for eliminating barricaded targets. Her phone rang one final time. Agent Foster, calling with information that couldn't wait. Elena, we've identified the leak. The inside intelligence came from someone in your former command structure. This whole operation is designed to eliminate you and Vasquez, simultaneously removing both a turned intelligence asset and a witness to NCIS corruption. Elena's blood went cold as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. This wasn't just an assassination. It was a cover-up designed to eliminate everyone who could expose the truth about her military discharge. 18 months ago, someone had destroyed her career to hide their own failures. Now they were trying to eliminate her permanently. Foster, Elena said quietly, patch me through to Jake's radio frequency. It's time everyone understood exactly who they've been working with. Elena keyed her radio, and when she spoke, her voice carried the full authority of 8 years serving her country in the most dangerous places on Earth. All stations. This is Lieutenant Elena Martinez, United States Navy SEALs. I am assuming tactical command of this operation under federal emergency protocols. The silence that followed was deafening. Elena could imagine Jake's expression, Derek's confusion, Maria's shock as they processed the revelation that their quiet colleague was one of the most elite warriors the American military produced. But Elena wasn't finished. Moving with the silent precision that had kept her alive through countless combat operations, she approached the conference room where 2 killers were about to discover that their intelligence about civilian security response had been catastrophically wrong. Jake, Derek, Maria, Elena continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. For 18 months, I've been hiding my military service because I was forced out under false charges. Today, I'm choosing to reclaim that identity because protecting innocent lives is more important than protecting comfortable lies. Through the conference room door, she could hear the final countdown in Russian, Trident. Elena burst through the emergency exit door adjacent to the conference room just as the breaching charges detonated, using the explosion's confusion to close distance with the assault team. Her SEAL training took complete control target identification, threat assessment, engagement priorities calculated and executed in the span of heartbeats. The first assailant never saw her coming. Elena's approach from an unexpected angle caught him focusing on the breech door, and her hand-to-hand combat training neutralized him before he could raise his weapon. The second operative turned toward the new threat, but 18 months of hiding had done nothing to diminish reflexes honed by years of life-or-death training. Within 30 seconds, both former Russian Special Forces operators were unconscious and secured with improvised restraints. Elena stood in the corridor, breathing hard but uninjured, as federal agents poured into the building, with tactical precision that confirmed they had been preparing for this moment. Through her earpiece, she could hear Jake's voice, filled with awe and disbelief. Elena, Jesus Christ, Elena, you just took down 2 armed men like it was nothing. Agent Foster's voice came through her phone with unmistakable relief. Lieutenant Martinez, federal agents are securing the scene. Your military record is being officially restored effective immediately. Welcome back to active duty. Elena looked around the corridor where she had just used skills that were supposed to remain buried forever. 18 months of careful anonymity had been destroyed in 30 seconds of combat, but as she saw Vasquez emerge from the conference room unharmed, she realized that some sacrifices were worth making. Her radio crackled with Derek's voice, now. Carrying a respect that had been absent for 18 months. "Elena, Lieutenant Martinez, I owe you an apology. We all do." Elena smiled as federal agents moved to secure the unconscious assault team. "Call me Elena," she said. "But now you know why I was qualified for more than parking patrol." The question was no longer whether her military identity would remain hidden. The question was what she would do with a life that had just been handed back to her, complete with the respect and recognition that had been stolen 18 months ago. The federal agents who flooded into the Apex Security Solutions building moved with the kind of coordinated precision that made Elena's tactical heart sing. These weren't regular law enforcement officers scrambling to catch up with events. These were operators who had been planning this intervention for weeks, possibly months. Agent Foster appeared in the corridor first, her expression mixing relief with something that looked like guilt as she surveyed the unconscious assault team Elena had neutralized. Behind her came a figure Elena hadn't seen in 18 months, Commander Sarah Wells, the woman who had signed the papers ending her military career. "Lieutenant Martinez," Commander Wells said, her voice carrying the weight of 18 months of regret. "It's time we had a conversation that should have happened long ago." Elena's colleagues gathered in the building's lobby like survivors of a natural disaster, their faces displaying varying degrees of shock, confusion, and dawning comprehension. Jake stood with his mouth hanging open, occasionally shaking his head as if trying to wake up from an impossible dream. Derek clutched his clipboard like a lifeline, his business-focused mind struggling to process the revelation that his most underestimated employee was actually one of the military's elite warriors. Only Maria seemed unsurprised by the transformation, her knowing smile suggesting she had always suspected there was more to Elena than met the eye. "Before we begin," Agent Foster announced to the assembled group, "I need to explain what you've all just witnessed and why Lieutenant Martinez has been working under an assumed identity for the past 18 months. Elena watched her colleagues' faces as Agent Foster began unraveling the carefully constructed lies that had defined her civilian existence. The truth, when spoken aloud in the harsh fluorescent lighting of an office building, sounded like something from a movie rather than the mundane reality of changing oil and checking security passes. Elena Martinez is actually Lieutenant Elena Martinez, United States Navy SEALs, with 8 years of active service, including classified operations in counterterrorism and special reconnaissance. 18 months ago, she was administratively separated from the military under circumstances that we now know were based on falsified evidence. Jake's voice cracked as he found his words. "Navy SEALs? Elena, you're telling me that for 18 months, I've been ordering around a Navy SEAL?" Elena met his gaze with a slight smile. "You were ordering around a security guard who happened to have military training. I chose to follow your orders because maintaining my cover was more important than my ego." Commander Wells stepped forward, her dress uniform decorated with ribbons that Elena recognized from her own military service. "Lieutenant Martinez, on behalf of the United States Navy, I want to formally apologize for the injustice you suffered. New evidence has proven beyond doubt that you were innocent of all charges related to Operation Sandstorm." The words Elena had dreamed of hearing for 18 months felt strangely hollow when finally spoken. Vindication, it turned out, was less satisfying than she had imagined when it came at the cost of everything she had built in civilian life. "What kind of new evidence?" Derek asked, his businessman's instincts focusing on the details that would help him understand what had really happened. Agent Foster consulted her tablet, pulling up files that had been classified until this morning. Digital forensics recovered from Commander Wells's predecessor, Captain Morrison, revealed systematic deletion of reports filed by Lieutenant Martinez. Captain Morrison had been compromised by foreign intelligence and was using administrative separation as a weapon to remove personnel who might expose his activities. Elena felt the familiar burn of betrayal, but this time it was mixed with relief. Captain Morrison, the man who had smiled sympathetically while destroying her career, had finally been exposed as the traitor she had unknowingly been investigating. Morrison was selling intelligence about SEAL operations to the same networks that hired today's assault team. Commander Wells continued. Elena's report about the recruitment attempt would have exposed his activities, so he eliminated both the report and the reporter. Maria spoke up for the first time, her voice carrying the protective anger of someone who had watched a friend suffer in silence. So you destroyed her career to protect a traitor? Captain Morrison destroyed her career, Commander Wells replied. We failed to investigate thoroughly enough to prevent it. That failure ends today. Elena's radio crackled with updates from the federal agents securing the building. The assault team's equipment was being analyzed, their communications intercepted, their connections to foreign intelligence networks mapped in real time. What had started as a simple client protection assignment had become a major counterintelligence. Operation, Elena, Jake said quietly. I owe you an apology. We all do. For 18 months, we treated you like a security guard, Elena finished for him. Which is exactly what I wanted you to do. If you had recognized my military training, someone would have asked questions that could have gotten people killed. Vasquez emerged from the conference room flanked by his security detail, his distinguished appearance somewhat diminished by the stress of surviving an assassination attempt. But his eyes, when they fixed on Elena, carried the kind of respect reserved for people who had risked their lives to protect others. Lieutenant Martinez, Vasquez said, extending his hand with formal courtesy. I owe you my life. My intelligence sources had identified the threat, but they underestimated the level of protection available. Elena shook his hand, noting the calluses. That suggested Vasquez had once been a soldier himself before becoming an arms dealer turned intelligence asset. Just doing my job, sir. Your job, Vasquez replied with a slight smile, apparently involves capabilities that most people can only imagine. Derek found his voice again, his expression mixing embarrassment with newfound respect. Elena, I need to ask, and I understand if you can't answer, but how long have you been? I mean, what exactly have you been qualified to do this whole time? Elena considered the question carefully. For 18 months, she had hidden her qualifications behind a facade of mediocrity. Now, with her military record restored and her capabilities publicly demonstrated, there was no point in continued deception. Specialized in direct action operations, counter-terrorism, close-quarters combat, advanced tactical planning, and executive protection, Elena replied matter-of-factly. I'm qualified to lead special operations teams, conduct classified reconnaissance missions, and neutralize threats that regular military units can't handle. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Jake's clipboard hitting the floor. Jesus Christ, Elena, he whispered. We had you checking parking meters. Elena laughed, the first genuine laugh her colleagues had heard from her in 18 months. I was very good at checking parking meters. Attention to detail is important in any assignment. Commander Wells stepped forward with an official-looking folder. Lieutenant Martinez, your military record has been fully restored, including all commendations and your security clearance. More importantly, you're being offered immediate reinstatement with full back pay and a promotion to lieutenant. Commander. Elena accepted the folder but didn't open it immediately. The vindication she had dreamed of was finally here, but 18 months of civilian life had changed her perspective on what really mattered. Commander Wells, Elena said quietly, I need time to consider the offer. I've built a life here, and these people have become my family, even if they didn't know who I really was. Maria stepped forward with tears in her eyes. Hermana, you saved that man's life. You saved all our lives. Whatever you decide to do next, remember that you'll always have a home here. Elena looked around at the faces of people who had accepted her as Elena Martinez, security guard, and were now struggling to reconcile that identity with Elena Martinez, Navy SEAL. The question wasn't whether she could return to military service. It was whether she wanted to leave behind the life she had built in the ruins of her military career. Some revelations changed everything. Others simply revealed what had been there all along, waiting for the right moment to emerge from the shadows. The transformation in the days following the assault was unlike anything Elena had experienced in 18 months of civilian life. Word of the Navy SEAL security guard, who had single-handedly neutralized a Russian Special Forces team, spread through Phoenix's business community like wildfire, bringing a level of attention that made Elena simultaneously proud and uncomfortable. Apex Security Solutions had become the most requested firm in Arizona overnight. Derek's phone rang continuously with clients who specifically wanted the SEAL handling their protection, willing to pay premium rates for someone with Elena's demonstrated capabilities. The same business owners who had questioned her competence weeks earlier now competed for her services, but the most significant change was in her colleagues' behavior. Jake, who had spent 18 months treating Elena like an incompetent subordinate, now approached her with the careful respect usually reserved for superior officers. His transformation from dismissive colleague to deferential student was so complete it made Elena uncomfortable. Elena, I mean Lieutenant Martinez, Jake said during their first shift together after the revelation. I was wondering if you could show me how would you be willing to train me in tactical assessment? Elena looked at the man who had spent 18 months explaining basic security procedures to her as if she were a child learning to walk. His request was genuine, his humility complete, but the role reversal felt surreal. Jake, I'm still Elena, she replied gently. My military training doesn't change the fact that you're good at your job. You just handle different kinds of threats than I was trained for. But Jake shook his head, his expression carrying the weight of 18 months of missed opportunities. Elena, I've been doing security for 12 years, and I never saw that assault coming. You identified it before it happened and neutralized it like something from a movie. I need to learn from someone who knows what real threats look like. Elena's vindication was complete when Brad Mitchell returned to Apex Security Solutions 3 days later, his previous arrogance replaced by the grudging respect of someone who had been proven spectacularly wrong. Ms. Martinez, Brad said, his tone formal rather than dismissive, I owe you an apology. My security team analyzed your initial assessment of our vulnerabilities, and every point you identified was accurate. More importantly, intelligence suggests my company was being surveilled by the same network that targeted Vasquez. Elena accepted his apology with professional courtesy, but privately she noted how respect had followed demonstration rather than explanation. For 18 months, she could have described her qualifications, but only action had convinced skeptics of her capabilities. Derek pulled Elena into his office for a conversation that had been inevitable since federal agents restored her military record. Elena, I need to be honest about something, Derek began, his expression mixing embarrassment with newfound respect. For 18 months, I've been paying you a third of what your qualifications deserve. I want to correct that immediately. Elena studied her boss, seeing genuine remorse in his expression. Derek had always been fair within the limitations of his understanding, but those limitations had been profound. Derek, you paid me what a security guard with my apparent experience level deserved, Elena replied. The military training I kept hidden doesn't change the fact that you gave me work when I needed it most. But it does change what you're worth to this company, Derek insisted. Elena, we've received 17 new client contracts specifically requesting your services. 3 of them are Fortune 500 companies willing to pay rates that will transform Apex Security Solutions. Elena felt the familiar weight of expectations that had driven her to hide her capabilities in the first place. Success had always come, with demands for more success, more responsibility, more sacrifice of personal life for professional achievement. What if I don't want to transform Apex Security Solutions? Elena asked quietly. What if I prefer the work we were doing before everyone knew about my background? Derek's expression showed he had expected this question. Elena, you can't put that genie back in the bottle. Your military service is public knowledge now. You can either use your capabilities to build something meaningful, or watch other people try to capitalize on your reputation. Maria knocked on the office door, entering with the kind of protective concern that had characterized their friendship throughout Elena's civilian exile. Elena, there's someone here to see you, Maria said, her tone suggesting the visitor was significant. Captain Rebecca Hayes, Naval Special Warfare Command. She says it's about your future with the SEALs. Elena's stomach clenched. She had known. This moment would come the formal offer to return to military service, complete with the rank and responsibilities that her restored record made possible. Captain Hayes entered Derek's office with the bearing of someone accustomed to command authority. Her uniform displayed ribbons that Elena recognized from her own military service, including several that indicated combat deployments and classified operations. Lieutenant Commander Martinez, Captain Hayes said, using Elena's newly restored rank, I'm here to discuss your return to active duty. The Naval Special Warfare community needs experienced operators who understand both military and civilian security challenges. Elena felt the pull of her former life, the camaraderie of elite units, the satisfaction of missions that mattered, the identity that had defined her adult life until 18 months ago. Captain Hayes, I'm honored by the interest, but I need to understand what return to active duty would mean for the life I've built here. Captain Hayes consulted her tablet, pulling up what appeared to be a comprehensive proposal. The Navy recognizes that your civilian experience has value. We're prepared to offer a unique position developing security protocols for high-value civilian assets while maintaining your connection to Special Operations community. What kind of position? Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. You would establish and lead a new unit combining military special operations expertise with civilian security operations. Based here in Phoenix, working with both federal agencies and private sector clients. Lieutenant Commander Martinez, you would be writing the book on how elite military training translates to civilian protection operations. Elena looked around Derek's cramped office, thinking about the 18 months she had spent hiding her capabilities while rebuilding her sense of self-worth. The military was offering her everything she had lost, plus opportunities she had never imagined. But acceptance would mean leaving behind the people who had accepted her without knowing her credentials. Captain Hayes, I need time to consider the offer, Elena said finally. I've learned that making decisions under pressure rarely leads to the best outcomes. Of course. But Lieutenant Commander, don't take too long. The operational tempo in special operations doesn't wait for anyone's personal timeline. As Captain Hayes left, Elena remained in Derek's office, caught between two worlds that no longer seemed mutually exclusive. Her vindication was complete, her military record restored, her capabilities acknowledged, her worth recognized by everyone who had previously dismissed her. But vindication, Elena realized, was less important than the relationship she had built while hiding from it. The question wasn't whether she deserved respect, it was what kind of life she wanted to build with the respect she had finally reclaimed. Elena, Derek said quietly, whatever you decide, remember that respect isn't something that can be given or taken away. It's something you earn through actions, and your actions speak louder than any rank or title. Elena smiled, understanding that her vindication had come not from official acknowledgement of her military service, but from the moment she chose to risk everything to protect others. Some victories were measured in restored records, and corrected injustices. Others were measured in the willingness to act when action mattered most. 6 weeks after the assault, Elena stood in what had once been Apex Security Solutions' cramped break room, now transformed into a state-of-the-art tactical training center. Federal funding, combined with contracts from clients who specifically requested her expertise, had enabled renovations that Derek could never have imagined when he hired her 18 months ago. The transformation wasn't limited to physical spaces. Jake stood at attention as Elena concluded a tactical assessment briefing, his notebook filled with observations that would have been incomprehensible to him 2 months earlier. His evolution from dismissive colleague to dedicated student represented everything Elena had hoped to achieve by staying in the civilian world. "Jake, your threat identification has improved dramatically," Elena said, reviewing his latest security evaluation. "You're starting to think 3 steps ahead of potential problems, instead of just reacting to obvious threats." Jake's face flushed. With pride at praise from someone he now understood was one of the military's most elite warriors. "Elena, I never realized how much I didn't know about real security work. 18 months of working next to you, and I was completely blind to your capabilities." "You saw what I wanted you to see," Elena replied. "But more importantly, you've proven that tactical thinking can be taught to anyone willing to learn. That's more valuable than natural talent." Maria entered the training center with a stack of contract proposals that had become a daily routine since Elena's military background became public knowledge. Corporate executives who had once dismissed Apex Security Solutions now competed for appointments with the firm that employed a Navy SEAL. "Elena, we've got 3 more Fortune 500 companies requesting security assessments," Maria announced, her smile reflecting the pride she felt in watching her friend's expertise finally receive recognition. "Plus the State Department wants to discuss a consulting contract for embassy security protocols." Elena accepted the proposals, but her attention was focused on the training schedule posted on the wall. In addition to Jake, she was now teaching tactical skills to security personnel from 5 other firms, federal agents seeking specialized training, and civilians who wanted to understand personal protection beyond basic self-defense. Derek emerged from his office, now expanded to accommodate the administrative demands of their growing operation, with an expression mixing excitement and disbelief. "Elena, I just got off the phone with Captain Hayes," Derek announced. "The Navy has approved the hybrid program you proposed. You'll maintain your military rank while operating as a civilian contractor, developing training protocols that can be used by both military and private security firms." Elena had spent weeks negotiating the arrangement that would allow her to bridge 2 worlds that had seemed mutually exclusive. Rather than choosing between military service and civilian relationships, she had convinced both sides that her unique experience could benefit everyone. "What does that mean for Apex Security Solutions?" Jake asked, voicing the concern that had worried Elena's colleagues since military officials began visiting regularly. "It means Elena remains our partner while also serving as a military consultant," Derek explained. "Apex becomes the primary civilian training facility for the new hybrid program. We get to keep Elena, and the military gets to study how special operations training translates to civilian applications." Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Agent Foster. "Elena wanted you to know that Captain Morrison was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for espionage. Justice delayed, but not denied." Elena stared at the message, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Morrison's conviction completed her vindication, but it couldn't restore the 18 months of exile or the relationships that had been damaged by his betrayal. Some wounds healed, but they left scars that served as permanent reminders. A knock on the training center door interrupted her thoughts. Elena looked up to see Brad Mitchell entering with 2 other executives she didn't recognize, their expressions carrying the kind of respect she had once taken for granted in military circles. "Lieutenant Commander Martinez," Brad said, using her restored rank with careful precision. "I'd like you to meet Sarah Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies, and Robert Williams, Head of Security for Williams International. They're here to discuss expanding your consulting services." Elena shook hands with the executives, noting how their deference contrasted sharply with the dismissive treatment she had received just weeks earlier. Success, she reflected, had a way of rewriting history in people's minds. "Lieutenant Commander," Sarah Chun began, "we understand you're developing new security protocols that combine military tactical training with civilian protection requirements. My company handles sensitive technology contracts that require that exact combination of expertise." Robert Williams nodded enthusiastically. "The security industry has been waiting for someone with your background and credentials to bridge the gap between military capabilities and civilian needs. We're prepared to fund a significant expansion of your training programs." Elena listened to their proposals with growing amazement. The same corporations that had questioned her competence when she was Elena Martinez, security guard, now competed to associate themselves with Lieutenant Commander Elena Martinez, Navy SEAL. But the most significant transformation was in Elena herself. For 18 months, she had hidden her capabilities to avoid scrutiny. Now she embraced those capabilities while maintaining the humility and perspective that her civilian exile had taught her. "Ms. Chun, Mr. Williams," Elena replied, "I'm interested in your proposals, but I need you to understand something important. The military training that enables me to handle extreme threats also taught me that the best security is often invisible. Sometimes the most qualified person in the room is the one nobody notices." The executives exchanged glances, clearly intrigued by her approach. "What do you mean?" Sarah Chun asked. Elena gestured toward Jake, who was reviewing security protocols at a nearby desk. "6 weeks ago, my colleague Jake thought I was incompetent because I kept my qualifications hidden. Today, he's developing tactical skills that will make him one of the best security professionals in Arizona." Real transformation happens when you develop people's capabilities rather than just hiring impressive credentials. Maria approached with the afternoon schedule, her expression carrying the satisfaction of someone watching dreams become reality. "Elena, the Phoenix Police Department wants to discuss training programs for their tactical units. Plus we've got that meeting with the university about campus security protocols." Elena looked around the transformed facility, seeing physical evidence of what could be accomplished when people were given opportunities to exceed their perceived limitations. Jake had evolved from dismissive colleague to skilled tactical thinker. Derek had grown from small business owner to partner in a nationally recognized security firm. Even Maria had expanded her role from receptionist to operations coordinator for a cutting-edge training program. "Elena," Derek said quietly, approaching with the kind of respect that had been absent for 18 months, "I need to ask you something. Do you regret the time you spent hiding your background? Do you wish you had revealed your military service from the beginning?" Elena considered the question carefully. The 18 months of exile had been painful, but they had also been educational in ways that military service couldn't provide. "Derek, those 18 months taught me that respect earned through actions is more valuable than respect demanded through credentials," Elena replied. "If I had introduced myself as a Navy SEAL, you would have hired me for my resume. Instead, you learned to value my judgment based on my performance." She paused, looking at each person who had become family during her civilian exile. "More importantly, hiding my background taught me that everyone has hidden potential waiting for the right opportunity to emerge. That lesson is more valuable than any military training I received." As Elena prepared for the afternoon's meetings, she realized that her transformation was complete. She was no longer Elena Martinez hiding from her past or lieutenant commander. Martinez defined by her military service. She was someone new, a bridge between worlds that had once seemed incompatible. Proof that the most important victories were often won not by choosing sides, but by refusing to accept that sides had to be chosen at all. 2 years later, Elena stood before a gathering that would have been unimaginable when she first arrived in Phoenix as a broken exile from military service. The Apex Institute for Advanced Security Training had become the premier facility in the southwestern United States, housing classrooms, tactical training centers, and simulation environments that attracted students from around the world. But the most remarkable transformation wasn't in the buildings or equipment. It was in the people whose lives had been fundamentally changed by discovering capabilities they never knew they possessed. Jake Rodriguez. He had legally changed his last name to honor Carlos, who had been promoted to lead the Institute's Spanish language program, stood at the podium addressing a graduating class of 47 security professionals. His transformation from dismissive colleague to respected instructor represented everything Elena had hoped to accomplish by choosing to stay in the civilian world. 3 years ago, Jake began, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had discovered hidden depths within himself. I thought I understood security work. I believed that experience was more valuable than education, that instinct was more important than training, and that military backgrounds were overrated in civilian applications. Elena watched from the back of the auditorium as Jake described his journey from skepticism to understanding, his words resonating with students who had arrived carrying their own assumptions about capability and potential. Then I met someone who challenged every assumption I had made about talent, training, and the invisible potential that exists in people around us every day. Lieutenant Commander Elena Martinez taught me that the most dangerous words in any profession are "that's not how we do things here." The applause that followed was genuine, enthusiastic, and directed as much toward Elena as toward Jake. She had learned to accept recognition gracefully, understanding that her visibility made possible the success of dozens of others who had discovered their own hidden capabilities. Maria Santos, now the Institute's Director of Operations, approached Elena with the quarterly progress report that had become a source of pride for everyone involved in the program's development. "Elena, the numbers are incredible," Maria said, her voice carrying the satisfaction of someone watching dreams exceed expectations. "We've trained security personnel for 12 federal agencies, 38 corporations, and 14 foreign governments. More importantly, 89% of our graduates report discovering capabilities they didn't know they possessed." Elena accepted the report, but her attention was focused on the individual success stories that statistics couldn't capture. Like Carmen Rodriguez, a former hotel housekeeper who had become one of the Southwest's most skilled surveillance detection specialists. Or David Chun, a retired accountant whose analytical mind had proven ideal for threat assessment and risk management. "Maria, what's the most common feedback from graduates?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "They say the program taught them to see themselves differently," Maria replied. "Not just their professional capabilities, but their potential for growth in every aspect of their lives." Elena's phone buzzed with a message from Agent Foster, now a deputy director at NCIS. "Elena, wanted you to know that your training protocols are being adopted by military units worldwide. The hybrid approach is revolutionizing how we think about security education." Elena smiled as she read the message, remembering the woman who had once been instrumental in destroying her military career and had become one of her strongest advocates. Some relationships could be rebuilt on stronger foundations than those on which they were originally constructed. Derek Hammond entered the auditorium with a group of visitors Elena didn't recognize, their bearing and attention to detail suggesting military or intelligence backgrounds. His transformation from struggling small business owner to partner in a nationally recognized institution had been as dramatic as anyone's. "Elena, I'd like you to meet Colonel Patricia Martinez, no relation, from Army Special Operations Command." And Director James Wilson from the CIS Security Training Division, Derek announced, his voice carrying the pride of someone whose business had evolved beyond his wildest expectations. Elena shook hands with the officials, noting how their deference contrasted with the skepticism she had faced during her early civilian years. Success had a way of opening doors that had once seemed permanently closed. Lieutenant Commander Martinez, Colonel Martinez began, we're here to discuss expanding your training model to military installations worldwide. The feedback from personnel who have attended your programs has been extraordinary. Director Wilson nodded enthusiastically. The intelligence community has been searching for training approaches that bridge the gap between military precision and civilian adaptability. Your institute has proven that such bridges not only exist, but can be systematically developed. Elena listened to their proposals with the kind of measured consideration that had replaced the desperate eagerness of her early civilian years. Opportunity was no longer scarce, it was abundant to the point of requiring careful selection rather than grateful acceptance. Colonel Martinez, Director Wilson, Elena replied, I'm honored by your interest, but I need you to understand the philosophy that makes our program successful. We don't just train people to follow protocols. We teach them to discover capabilities they didn't know they possessed. She gestured toward the graduation ceremony taking place on the auditorium stage, where students from backgrounds ranging from fast food, service to corporate management were receiving certifications in advanced security operations, the most important lesson I learned during my 18 months of hiding is that talent exists everywhere. But opportunity is often limited by other people's assumptions about who deserves development and who doesn't. Elena paused, thinking about her own journey from exile to recognition, and the hundreds of others who had followed similar paths of discovery and growth. Our success isn't measured by the sophistication of our training equipment or the impressiveness of our graduate statistics. It's measured by the number of people who leave here understanding that their potential wasn't determined by their starting point, but by their willingness to grow beyond other people's expectations. As the graduation ceremony concluded and families gathered to celebrate achievements that would have seemed impossible years earlier, Elena found herself standing alone on the small stage where she had once hidden her capabilities behind a facade of modest competence. The scene reminded her of countless military ceremonies she had attended in her former life, but the energy was completely different. Those events had been about individual achievement within established hierarchies. This celebration was about collective transformation and the expansion of human potential. Jake approached the stage with his certificate of completion from the Institute's Instructor Development Program, his expression mixing pride with the kind of gratitude that comes from discovering hidden capabilities. Elena, I need to tell you something, Jake said, his voice thick with emotion. 3 years ago, I thought I knew everything I needed to know about security work. Today, I realize that was the most dangerous assumption I could have made. Elena smiled, remembering her own assumptions about the limitations of civilian life and the impossibility of bridging military and civilian worlds. Jake, the most important skill in any profession is the willingness to admit what you don't know and the courage to learn from people who might surprise you. As Elena drove home through the familiar streets of Phoenix, she reflected on the question that had defined her civilian exile. What happens when someone with extraordinary capabilities chooses to hide them rather than display them? The answer, she had learned, was that hidden capabilities were like seeds waiting for the right conditions to grow. Sometimes those conditions required patience, humility, and the willingness to be underestimated while building something more important than individual recognition. Elena's Trident, the Navy SEAL emblem that had remained hidden for 18 months, now sat proudly on her office desk. No longer a secret to be concealed, but a symbol of capabilities that could lift others rather than intimidate them. Her legacy wouldn't be measured in military commendations or corporate contracts, but in the hundreds of people who had discovered that their potential wasn't limited by other people's expectations. Some victories created individual success. Others created communities of people, empowered to exceed their own assumptions about what was possible. Elena had learned that the most important question wasn't whether you had extraordinary capabilities, but what you chose to do with them once they were revealed. The answer she had discovered was always the same: use them to help others discover the extraordinary capabilities they carried within themselves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.